Hi, welcome back to my channel, Manga Hoarder. My name is Laura and today I am doing a tag video. This is the Manga Worldwide tag. It was created by Highland manga and Prattay YTer. Sorry if I pronounced your channel name wrong, but I was actually tagged to do this by Prattay. This is sort of a challenge or a tag to talk about kind of the manga where you're from, and I thought it was actually really good and unique tag. We haven't seen this kind of tag in our community yet, and so I was really excited to be tagged in it. It was a good video. Both of these manga tubers are pretty new. You should definitely go and check them out, and I will have them linked up down below. Please go and check out their video. But I'm just going to get into the questions and answer them. So the first question is, where are you from? I am from Alberta, Canada. I live really close to the Rocky Mountains in a big city. It's one of the biggest cities in Canada. I don't know. I don't think I have anything else to say. You've either heard of it or you haven't. We did host the Olympics in '88, and we're known for our oil industry and cattle. We're kind of at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, so we're mostly prairie, but we do get a pretty nice variety of wilderness. Where do you buy manga? I buy most of my manga online, but I could also say, where haven't I gotten manga? I have literally gotten manga from everywhere that you could possibly get it. You know, I've gotten it at garage sales, I've gotten it from trade from people, from friends. I've even, you know, I've bought it online, I've bought it on eBay, I've bought it in store, in both, you know, big box stores as well as in comic book stores. I have bought it abroad. I have, you know, even gotten manga at grocery stores in those, you know, free book exchange. We found manga in those. So I genuinely, anywhere that manga exists, I have gotten it at that place. But my primary place to buy manga is online. And I would say that I just favor anywhere that it's cheap. It doesn't really matter to me where it comes from. The next question is, does your country publish any manga? It does, but I would say probably 99% of at least English language manga is still coming out of the States, but we do have at least one small publisher that I know of. I'm sure that there's some other little independent publishers that might have their hand in this as well, but there is one small publisher that you may have heard of that's called Drawn and Quarterly that is in, I believe, Quebec, and they have you know, a larger collection of comics that they publish, mostly kind of like graphic novel style, like serious comics, and kind of independent style comics. A lot of Canadian creators, of course, but they also publish some manga. Most of the manga that they have are probably Gekiga works. So they publish a lot of Yoshihiro Tatsumi, who is sort of the founder of Gekiga, or at least the definer of Gekiga. We have a lot of Shigeru Mizuki, who's the author of Kitaro, as well as this huge history series. And then some other just sort of random artistic Gekiga works like Seiichi Hayashi. So you do get some really good titles from them, and you know, I buy pretty much everything that I've seen from them. I might not have everything, but I certainly buy it anytime I see it. And you know, I also like to read a lot of their other comics that they have, and for the most part I enjoy them. I like the curation that they do. I do like Canadian independent artists, and I think as a Canadian it's important that I don't just read manga. I'm not just solidly invested in manga, you know, that I also read kind of local works. Or works by Canadians. But I was going to answer this question a little bit further because Prattay said that there was only there weren't any publishers in India, and I actually have two manga that were published in India, and so I thought I would share them as well. One is a small publisher called Comics India, and they've so far as I know, have only come out with this title here, which is YTer, which is a combination of, or kind of a collaboration between some Gekiga artists as well as Indian comic book artists, and you should definitely check it out if you're interested in looking into Indian comics. It's a pretty cool title. And then I also have this title. This was published by Blaft Publications. As far as I know, it's a very small publisher as well, and I don't know that they've published anything else but the series of manga, at least. They might have. They're still pretty new to me, but this is Stupid Guy Goes to India by Yukichi Yamamatsu, and it's a story about a Japanese man who wants to start the manga industry in India and goes over to India, but not having done any research or any language training or really planned anything at all. He just lands in India and is like, okay, now what do I do? It's an interesting title, and certainly really gives you kind of the culture clash between Japanese and Indian cultures. It's pretty cool to read. So there are two, you know, not huge publishers and certainly not publishing a ton of manga, but there's some in there, and I thought it was really cool. Those are both titles that I started collecting over the last year, so they were unknown to me until just last year, but I thought I would bring them up because, yeah, they exist. But as far as Canadians go, I only really know of Drawn and Quarterly. Like, there's lots of comic book publishers, a lot of smaller publishers, particularly in Canada. And I think a lot of manga, even though it is, you know, published in America, I think a lot of it gets printed in Canada, or at least I have seen printed in Canada on some of the books, but I couldn't even tell you which ones they are at this point. But for the most part, I think Drawn and Quarterly is sort of like our biggest player in manga, which, you know, not a lot, but, you know, America or US is our neighbor to the south, and you know, we have still pretty easy access, although when you do try to buy comics from the US, you really feel the border, because it's not as easy as it could be. The next question is, what is your childhood or school experience with manga? I really laughed when I heard this question because manga didn't exist when I was a child. It only started getting published in the mid-80s, and it really didn't kind of become anything. It was sort of still very unknown at that point. It wasn't until anime was airing that you really even started seeing manga being published in tankobon or digest volumes. Up until that point, it was sort of like testing the waters by publishing it in American style, you know, single issues, which I have quite a lot of at this point, but at the point that they were being published, they were mostly older titles, or, you know, kind of geared towards older men, and I certainly was not that demographic as a child. I'm not that demographic now, but at least I can appreciate what those titles are. So there was just never going to be an appeal for me. But as a child, I still was very much interested in comic books. In particular, I was a huge fan of just sort of funnies, you know, comic strips from newspapers. I collected a lot of digest volumes of different things, like Garfield in particular. I can think of a lot of Snoopy, Family Circus. I really liked Dilbert. That was a little bit later. So I have quite a lot of bound volumes of these kind of things, but most, I think my first love, particularly when I was in elementary school, was Archie comics, and I had tons and tons of Archie comics. I actually don't have any, well, I have one now. I got rid of all of them when I became, was in my 20s. So yeah, comics weren't really there. You know, my first introduction to manga or anime was in 95 when it started airing on TV, and it became a thing. That was when Sailor Moon started airing on TV. I was in high school at that point, and it wasn't until then that we knew that there was a difference. Even then it was sort of like, oh, here's this thing, we all really like it, or at least there was a couple of us who really liked it and we were really into it, and then we kind of learned more about it as we started looking more into it. But, you know, even up until that point, there was no internet, so there was no way for us to even learn about the stuff. You know, it was in 95, there was about 2 or 3 people I knew that had internet at that point. I was not one of them, and they were able to find out information about this Sailor Moon that was airing, and we were able to print pictures off of it, and we found out so much about it, and we learnt that that was anime, or at the time Japanimation, that's what we called it, and that turned into something, and we started to look for more things that were Japanimation. So my first series were things like Tattoo Master and Sorcerer on the Rocks, and what is it? There's a couple of series that are actually popular that people might know the names of, but Blue Seed was one that was pretty new. There wasn't a lot available. You know, you still were even renting videos from the video store in order to watch these things. There was no way to stream or to watch things online. You could buy things because eBay was pretty new at that point, so I was able to start buying things maybe in the early 2000s. But it just wasn't available. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't there. So I don't have an experience with manga in particular. Not until 2003 when I picked my first manga up. I was already in my 20s, and that's a while ago. So yeah, there was no childhood experience of it, but I always was. I always loved comics. I always loved cartoons. It was just that I discovered a thing about cartoons that I could grasp onto, and so I could be even more invested in that thing. But it took a long time for that to, that there to be any sort of a relationship with that. At any rate, so the next question is, how many friends in real life do you have that read manga? I would say most of mine do. None of them, I think, read it to the extent that I read it. I have one other friend who is, I think, probably more invested in anime than manga, but does read some manga, but doesn't live here anymore. And, I'm kind of in this weird situation where everybody I know reads. I don't know non-readers. I don't even understand what that is. I really genuinely don't. I just don't get that someone wouldn't be a reader. So all of these people that I know are readers. Most of them are willing to read something different or are willing to read manga. It's not their first choice. So I frequently will recommend some title or other and they will pick them up. So all of my friends read. I would say 90% of them have read manga. I wouldn't say maybe 1% of them does read manga, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I'm just kind of in I think a special situation, because I hear a lot of people who say that their friends either don't read and so they're on BookTube because they have no one to talk to. I'm like, I'm the least reader of all of the people that I know. I don't read half as much as most of the people that I know because I read comics, and they all read novels, so yeah. But they do sometimes read comics, and mostly, as far as I know, on my recommendation, and so I've really enjoyed that the people around me have been willing to listen to me and try things out, because some of them have discovered titles that they've actually really liked, and that's cool. The next question is, what does your family think of manga? This one is interesting. Obviously, the person that I live with is my sister. We share this collection together. We buy as much manga as each other, and she reads more than I do. So obviously she loves it as much as I do. So, there's no opposition there. I do have other siblings. I don't really know what they think. I imagine they think it's sort of childish, but I've never talked to them about it. They did both read comics when we were younger, so I don't think it's really a point of argument. There's no point in talking about it. And, my parents, they always let us be who we were. So, if we had an interest, they let that happen. They let us like a thing that we wanted to like. They never tried to say, oh, you can't like that thing. And I've had many interests over the years, and they were always weird, compared to sort of what everyone else was doing. And, of course, I get teased about it, but it's never been in a malicious way or a disapproving way. So, yeah, I haven't really had that, or I've never really felt that. And certainly if anyone came up to me apart from my family and said kind of negative things about it, I probably would, if it was worth my time, I would probably argue the point. But I've never really had any significant opposition. I've certainly seen people, because like I've said, I am part of a very readery community, that some people tend to be snobbish about it as a format, but they're snobbish about so many things. And manga itself has only been in this country for, 30 years. It hasn't been here that long, so it takes a long time for people to get used to it. The fact of the matter is that, comic books had a huge opposition, so the fact that most of, the young population that I know is reading it, or at least sort of allows it with kind of out skepticism, just sort of tolerates it, is a huge change from how it was originally viewed. So I don't expect, welcoming open arms and, parades in my honor because I read this thing that, has had significant opposition up until this point. But, at the same time, at least in my family, they've always been supportive of whatever I wanted to do. I don't think anyone really cares too much one way or the other. I think they mostly think it's funny that I do YouTube. I think that's probably more where it gets weird and confusing for them. Like, why would I do this thing? I don't know. I felt like doing it, so why not? The next question is, I think this might be the last question. Do you have plans to learn Japanese or visit Japan? Yes, and of course. Who wouldn't? I would love to be in Japan all the time. I chose to not. I actually was offered a job to teach in Japan, and then I was also offered a job here, and it was sort of like, do I take the stable job, which was here, or do I go to Japan and just have fun? And I chose the stable route. There was other factors, of course, but I chose the stable route, and that's one of the reasons why I live with my sister. We own our home, and I have a pretty good job, and, I can visit Japan. I don't have to live there. So I have been to Japan twice, and I would like to go again. I actually, is one of the reasons why I have been so kind of tight with my money, is I have been saving money, but I am planning on doing sort of a short extended stay. I want to do a language program while I'm there, so yes, I do want to learn the language. I have recently kind of had a little bit of a, I don't know, midlife crisis, just sort of like a mini crisis, because I'm pulling back my finances, because sort of the recession is really hitting my city quite hard, and it is also increasing the prices of manga. I was putting titles into my cart on Amazon, and I just saw that the numbers were so much higher than they ever have been before. Some of the, really basic Shonen Jump titles, the prices have only jumped about $1 or $2 since I've started, and that's great. It's great that Viz can be so stable, but so many of the other things, there's a lot of collector's edition, hardcover edition, Gekiga titles, the prices are just climbing, and it's obscene, and I can't buy a fraction of the titles that I used to be able to buy. And I realized that, if I want to actually be able to read these and collect these, I can't afford to do it in English anymore. I am, of course, going to keep buying in English, but it's now or never. I have to learn the language. So I do have a head start. I at least know a bit of the language, and I am studying now. I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing that, and it may even take away from some of the YouTubing that I've been doing. I'll probably be pulling back, maybe not making quite so many videos. I'll still make some, but I probably, even over next year going forward, I might even pull back a little bit more, just so that I can spend time studying, because it matters to me that I should be able to read as much manga as I want. And, I have enough manga in my room that it probably would take me 3 years to get through it, or longer. Okay, that's a total lie. It'd probably take me 7 years to read everything in my room. But that's not enough for someone who loves manga. So I really want to focus on learning the language, and particularly when I'm motivated and I know I have a purpose and I know I have a goal, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to be studying a lot over the next couple of years, I imagine. Hopefully I'll be able to actually manage leveling up my language, because it has been stagnating and rusting for a long time. So yeah, I definitely want to be in Japan. I want to go to Japan. I want to be there all the time. I want to buy in Japanese and read in Japanese. I love Japan, and not just because of manga. Manga just is one small part of what I love about Japan. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely will be there, maybe in the next 3 years, or maybe 3 years from now. It may be a while before I can afford to do this thing that I have planned, but that is my plan at the moment. So I think that's everything that I wanted to say. I thought this were a pretty good tag. There was lots of cool things to talk about. But I am going to tag some people. I have ShaeGeeksOut, Bizarre Individual, Whimsical Pictures, Lita Kino, and Danny D, and Niji TV. So there's 6 of you. But if you want to do this video as well and you don't get tagged, feel free to do it anyway. That's totally okay to participate. Just be interesting to hear about manga, where you're from, and your experience with manga. Yeah, and let me know if you decide to do this tag. That'd be cool too. Anyway, thank you so much to Prattay and Highland Manga for the tag video. Definitely go and check out their videos, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.